I'm JJWalsh in Hiroshima, your host for this episode. And today I have the pleasure of talking to another talk show host, a podcaster, Christopher Schoenwald. Thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really looking forward to this. Had it circled on the calendar for a while. So yeah.
Wonderful. And I see that you are also streaming out to a lot of your channels. So, welcome to Christopher's audience. Thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah.
Now, I love your style and your format, and you always start with a definition of what the person does. So I thought just for you, it would be really fun to start with simple English Wikipedia. What is podcasting?
All
And
right.
it is so underwhelming and does not define what you do. It says podcasting is a way to share information as digital audio files. People often subscribe, download, and share podcasts using a computer and listen to them on an MP3 player. Many podcasts are similar to broadcast radio, news, or discussion programs.
Yeah. I mean, first off, what I could say, I mean, they need an update there, an MP3 player. I mean, when when was that entry put in there? That's the first thing I would go
It's
after.
like
But
saying videotape in this day.
yeah, right.
Crazy.
Um, yeah, I mean, and probably you would be able to speak to this as well. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. I was just speaking with a professional broadcaster just recently. It'll be an episode coming out next week, and this was a point of discussion that we had was the actual airtime, which say 45 minutes to an hour, is just a fraction of the amount of work that goes into it. Of course, you have like the preparation, the research, all of that stuff that happens way before the broadcast or the recording actually begins. So that would be the first thing I would probably add. And then also, at least for my program, I write up these big bios of the guests who come on, and that takes a bit of research and digging around and the correspondence back and forth with these people, trying to get that information. And once the recording takes place, then you have all the post production stuff that's going on. So yeah, there's certainly a lot to it, but I particularly, for me in particular, I really enjoy each step of it all. I mean, I'm learning and growing along the way as well. I mean, I've been at this for about 3 months now, so yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I think that's incredible that you've only done it for 3 months. I'm showing your website right now, Life as a. Let's start with how did you choose the name? You have a bit of a marketing background. Um, was that one of the reasons you chose the name?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was brainstorming about this program and what I wanted it to be, what I wanted it to stand for, yeah, life and kind of the discovery and curiosity and all those things surrounding life were part of it. And there's one other element that I put on the website, and you'll quickly find out. The focus is on work, and I explore guests, professions by way of guests from around the world, and I try to dig into some of the hidden details of the professions, but then also their lives associated with their jobs. I truly, truly believe that the way we see the world, our worldview, if you will, is shaped by what we do every day. I mean, just the simple math of it, say 8 hours a day, globally speaking, that might be the average in Japan, perhaps 10 to 12 hours a day that you're devoting to your work, to your craft. That definitely has an influence on the way you see the world, the way you interpret things. So it's impossible to ignore that aspect of work. But it all comes back around into this concept of life and living. And yeah, I was just brainstorming a little bit, mind mapped a few ideas, and that one just stuck for me, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a great website. Very
Thanks.
easy to navigate. I want to show how you do a description and quotes from each episode as well in a minute. But I
Sure.
love this part about a little bit about you, which I think the audience would like to know more about. So you have this transition picture from Tokyo to Okayama, rural Japan, is it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, both have a lot of meaning to me. Originally, well, I've been in Japan since 2003, I guess it would be. I'm losing track, to be honest, at this point, but I do know I'm approaching 20 years. but yeah, originally I'd started within this area, Okayama, Hiroshima prefectures, a little bit more rural, if you will, and 6 or 7 years in that area. Then moved up to Tokyo, spent 6 or 7 years there, and decided to move back. And yeah, I'm about 6 years into well, living here once again. So yeah, it's both areas have had a lot of personal sort of meaning to them in terms of my own, you know, stages of life and living. But I'm sure we're going to get into all of that today on the show. And I can explain a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Just before we move on, I love this picture. Is this your house? It looks beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's actually I've been really lucky in the sense that we have our house here, and it was built about 12, 13 years ago, but it's on the property of almost like a compound, I suppose, of this other really old Japanese house that my wife's grandfather had lived in for many, many years, and his family had lived in many, many years. I think the current structure right now is probably close to 150 years old. So it's that traditional style, and where that picture you had just shown, it was kind of the separate. You had this separate little room that probably in its day would have been used for the in-laws or the grandparents rather to have stayed in. And during COVID, it was one of my COVID projects to completely renovate that room and turn it into my own little space where I can store all my outdoor gear and do some of my work for this program. So yeah, that's kind of just overlooking this fabulous Japanese garden that yeah, I kind of just fell into and been lucky enough to be able to see every day.
Absolutely beautiful. I had a
Thank you.
great discussion again with Alex Kerr, who's a
Mm,
famous author, and he has all these amazing remodel projects of old traditional Japanese homes,
yeah.
but pulling them into modern relevance, making them comfortable and useful for modern people who
Yeah.
don't want to live in a museum. They
Yeah.
want to live in a beautiful Japanese aesthetic,
Hmm.
beautiful home, but also be comfortable and be able to live their modern lives. And it looks like you've done a great remodel job here.
Well, I tried. I mean, slap some paint on the walls, and you'd be amazed at just even something as simple as that. And put some flooring in, took out some of that old tatami that had been there for years and years. And yeah, again, it was a COVID project. I had lots of time. I wasn't going out, probably like most of us at during that period. So yeah, it's just sort of worked out, and I couldn't be happier with it. It's been great.
Yeah, gorgeous. And then you've got this gorgeous Japanese style garden behind you. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's another nice project for the trimming and the upkeep on it. But of course, yeah, I'm really truly blessed to have that and to be able to just kind of spend some time, have a nice cup of coffee in there, especially when the weather's turning as it is now, which is great. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, beautiful time of year. Originally you're from Canada, is that right?
yeah, that's right. I'm from a small town in Ontario, Canada, called Fort Erie. Shout out there. It's right across from Buffalo, New York. It's a border town, so yeah, it's an interesting place. It's really quaint, really quite beautiful unto itself. It hugs the coastline of Lake Erie. It's about 20 minutes south of Niagara Falls as well. So it was an interesting area to grow up within. Major tourist attraction there, and of course going into America whenever we wanted. So yeah, it was nice. Although I haven't been back in a while, unfortunately, but hope to this summer.
Yeah. I saw some Tim Hortons for sale coffee in Costco, and I thought, I think my guest tomorrow is from Canada.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, I hope it's there again because I purchased that what a year ago or so, and I was thrilled. I was absolutely over the moon. It's just that taste of home, and I went back 6 months later, and it was nowhere to be found. So I was completely gutted when I was unable to find it. But
I really liked Tim Hortons. I took students when I was a university teacher. I often took students study abroad programs,
yeah,
and we went to Victoria and Vancouver, and
okay,
I was introduced to Tim Hortons, and also introduced to A&W as a Canadian company, which I grew up in America, always
right,
thinking A&W was American. So
yeah,
that
yeah,
was
yeah,
fun.
yeah, yeah, totally. I'm still waiting for those Tim Hortons coffee shops to pop up here in Japan, but
I think I think they're coming, aren't
really?
they? I heard, yeah, I heard a rumor. Maybe
Wow.
maybe just a rumor. Yeah.
Well, let's hope and pray on that one.
Now I got an inkling that you might be from Canada because there were a few of your interviewers who were from Canada, but
Yeah.
you've chosen to interview people around the world. I would love to find out, how are you finding, or how are you thinking of who you want to interview for your show?
Yeah, great question. And it's an ongoing sort of thing that I'm, constantly sort of, I wouldn't say battling with, but trying to dig into. Yeah, I think part of it has been, well, one, I mean, I think it's great to have a global perspective. I think that's incredibly important. Not only for myself, I'm going to learn a lot, but then also I think for listeners too. It helps to kind of you know, see things through a different lens, get to understand, somebody else's viewpoint at times. And I feel, that's part of the problem right now that we're having in a global scale, in a sense, this divide or almost tribalism, you could call it, where people aren't necessarily, I don't know, comprehending or understanding the other side, or not willing to, maybe. And what I wanted to do is at least create these conversations, one, that were friendly in nature, and then two, allowed for people to take this information in, listen to it, digest it, and then hopefully maybe find a middle ground in a certain sense that will allow them to see another person's viewpoint. So that was one of the big reasons that I wanted this global sort of spread. And it's still, like I said, it's ongoing. There's certainly still areas within Europe and even within Africa as well that I haven't been able to reach just yet. But again, I'm 3 months in. It is on the radar, and it's certainly an area that I want to delve into and attract some guests from that area. In terms of, I guess, how I've been able to get some of them, yeah, it's just, I think it's been through a lot of grit, and I guess you could call it like some of the cold calling, not doing the calling, maybe the cold emailing, perhaps you could call it, but not so much that. There has been some of that in it, but also too, it's been a lot of just my own network. I think I've been lucky enough to have met a lot of interesting people. Just again living in Japan for about 20 years, and then when I was within Tokyo for about 6 years, I was quite active in terms of networking when I had my own business there, and I just built a network. And when I was deciding to launch this program, I thought that would be an excellent resource just to kind of, you know, reconnect with some of those people that I, when I'd met them, thought what they did was just amazing. And it just sort of went from there. And you have one interesting guest, and I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago. I'd probably at that point had been 13 guests that have been recorded and actually put out. So I just went back to a lot of those people, and under the premise that, great people know other great people. And that's kind of just been how it's working. They'll introduce me to somebody else that they think would be an excellent person or an excellent guest on the show. And within their own networks, they have these amazing people that are doing amazing things as well. And it's just sort of been snowballing from there. And once you get a few of these types of people on that are really captivating, I find that they sort of open up new avenues to explore for others. So it's been as simple and as complicated as that, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
no, it's great. I think starting from your existing network, it kind of sounds like how I started this talk show series, actually.
Mm,
I didn't know what to do during coronavirus, and I had been doing like in-person training, in-person consulting, a lot of travel,
yeah.
consulting for the travel industry. That's not going to happen anymore, right? And I was like, what do I do?
Right,
And
right,
I
right.
was really inspired by Gary Vee, who's a very popular social media
Yeah, of course.
kind
Yeah.
of influencer in the States. And he was like, just do what you can do. And
Hmm.
if you have a message, keep lifting up other people, because
Yeah.
everybody's struggling. So like you said, I just started reaching out to people on my Twitter network. Would you be interested in talking? Let's go live. Let's make it
Yeah.
transparent,
Yeah.
accountable, right? So
Yeah.
people can ask questions and jump on.
Yeah, and that's exactly been it, for you and your program. I know because I've been following along, and you have. I mean, you have had some pretty amazing guests on, and it's been really enjoyable. Like you said, it is transparent, and it's one of the nice things about this medium. I find is that it isn't as polished as, say, like a major news network like CNN or something of that nature, but that is the charm of it as well. I think that's what makes it real, and that's what makes it authentic. Not only for the guests but for the listeners as well. And I think that's probably fueling a lot of this boom within podcasts, and probably the thousands upon thousands that are constantly going live, or being launched even each day around this world. So
Yeah.
mm,
Plus, we were like you do a lot of your interviews via Zoom. Everybody
yeah,
knows how to use Zoom now.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I was getting really frustrated with being on a live Zoom call with interesting people and them not engaging with any of the audience. They
Mm,
weren't really engaging with our questions or comments. And I thought, what a wasted opportunity. Why not just put a video on YouTube?
yeah.
And like have no comments, which a lot of Japanese companies seem to do.
Yeah.
But having that element of engaging with a wider audience, you don't know who's going to be listening or who's going to
Mm,
find your video later and ask you a question or comment. I have people, and you will find this, Chris, you just started. I have people who are finding old videos from like 2 years ago and engaging with it new.
wow.
And then I'll be excited to go back to that episode and respond to a comment or question. So
Yeah.
it's always evolving and developing. And I think that is one of your key themes of a lot of your interviews. The interviewee often says, I feel like I'm still engaged with my topic. I'm still learning. I'm still
Hmm.
developing. I'm still
Hmm.
evolving. And that's why they're so passionate continuing about what they do, right?
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I think that's sort of one of the, I don't know, nuggets of, or words of wisdom, if you will, about finding passion in what you do, is that it's that sort of like that viewpoint of trying to constantly learn, uncover new things, or reinterpret things different ways. If you're able to do those types of things, you can find a lot of joy in what you do, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So on your website, you have this part where you say, why explore lives through the prism of work?
Hmm.
And so this is kind of like your premise for starting your podcast. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I think a big part of that, as I said earlier, is that just again the sheer amount of hours that we devote to our work. Like again within North America, or say within Europe, maybe it's 8 hours a day, which is still significant, right? Unfortunately, in Japan, maybe it's 10 to 12 hours for the typical Japanese worker. Well, very unfortunate. But either way, even on the low end of things, 8 hours a day. You add that up over the course of the week, those hours are significant, and you add in like the people that you're working with, the type of work that you're doing, the types of conversations that you're having within the workplace, whether it's with, again, colleagues, with clients, whoever it might be. That type of work is going to have an impact on you, on the way that you interact, the way that you see the world. It has this sort of indelible sort of influence on your whole worldview. So I think for me, at least in my program, to interview people, and with this theme of discovering life and living, it would be an injustice not to address this issue of work. Um, so yeah, I think that it was just one of those things that comes part and parcel with this experience of life and living. And also too, I think it's just incredibly interesting. That's one of the things I also mentioned on the site, is that our time is finite. I mean, there's only so much we can do here. And for me, at least, like there's so many other things I would love to be doing. I would love to be exploring, but to get to that point, like some of these professionals that you're having on your own program or mine or elsewhere, obviously like they put in years and years, not only the education, but then the experience. So of course, you as an individual can't do all of these things. You can't have 20 different careers. I mean, at least maybe you could, but it wouldn't be to the same degree of satisfaction, or you couldn't explore and interact with all that that would offer in that time. So I felt that this show could be a bit of a, I don't know, a cheat code, if you will, to at least kind of get a portal into this world. And maybe through listening to the program, you might momentarily sort of lose yourself in the moment, and imagine what it could be like, or might be like, to actually do that job. So yeah, that's definitely one side of it, I would say. But to be honest, there are several reasons why I launched the show as well. That's certainly one of them, but it's amongst many others.
It's like we're all kind of trying to find our feet during
Mm,
coronavirus, right?
yeah,
Like we might have been doing something else before, and this is kind of a transition, like finding ways to connect with other people,
yeah.
empower them and support them in what they're doing by doing the interviews, highlighting how great that is. And that not only helps you learn, but it also gives you and your audience a roadmap for how they can take risks or they can explore new careers they haven't thought of before, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. That's certainly an element too. It's one that I really hadn't considered so much, like the impact that it has on the guest as well. And well, now that you bring that up, I've had guests, after their programs have or the recordings have finished a week or two out, that they were being approached by people within their own networks or family and friends who are reaching out to them, and how rewarding that was for them in that sense. Just some of the compliments that were coming their way, but then also too, I guess, like the igniting of conversations that they were able to have with people that they'd lost touch with. So that's been really nice to hear as well. And then even just yesterday, I had somebody who had listened to a program. I just had an interview with an interpreter and translator, and this individual, she herself had been studying in the University of Toronto a couple of years back to become a translator and interpreter, but was finding it really difficult because all the agencies are asking for experience. What experience do you have? And she didn't have that yet. So just online, just yesterday, I'm like, well, why don't you get in touch with Ricardo, the guy I'd interviewed, and we'd lined that up, and now they're off arranging their own sort of Zoom chat to help each other out a little bit there. So I mean, those little things as well definitely have meaning to me too. But even outside of that, I mean, there's been some of the other things that when I was deciding on whether to do this or why to do this, some of my own personal motivations for this. I had other things written down. Like I had this big mind map, this big elaborate mind map of all these reasons. And one of the other ones was as simple as, I have two kids, 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And I just thought it'd be great, to expose them, especially my 9-year-old now, just her age and maturity. She's exploring the world herself, and this podcast has created opportunities where her and I can kind of explore things together, and has created a different type of dialogue for us. So, one, she's like learning about, I don't know, a master cake maker or something that she's interested in. Or she'll ask me, like, hey, dad, what about that guy who's got that machine that takes water out of the air and, is able to provide that for refugees? And we have these really interesting discussions, which has also been really rewarding. It's been cool because I put this down as a possibility. This could happen. And it's kind of come to fruition where I've had these conversations. And every week when I put up these new episodes, my daughter is always asking about it. And we're having these engaging talks. So that's been a neat one. And then also, too, I think just for my own learning as well, and to sort of satisfy my own needs and curiosity about different ways of life and living, we all already chatted about. So yeah, there's several different layers to it, I find, that offer a number of different rewards. So it's been great.
Definitely. And are you doing this as a side hustle or is this your main thing?
It's a bit of a side hustle right now, but eventually I have some plans. It was also another thing sort of off in that mind map as well of how we could eventually, monetize something like this. But first and foremost, right now, it's all about just creating great content,
Yeah.
one episode at a time, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
I think as you're building your brand and being consistent and being working with integrity,
yeah.
you will start to get leads. And this reminds me of something that one of your guests said, which I want to bring up in a minute. But Wendy has joined from Facebook. Great comment, Wendy. She says, Christopher, what a great premise. Happy the both of you are connecting with people and exploring the richness of life. Japan and elsewhere. These are times to make these connections and reflect.
Yeah,
Definitely.
totally,
Yeah,
totally agree with that,
wonderful.
Wendy. Thanks.
Now, I had just watched an episode that you did with Cindy Mullins,
Yep.
and you do this great thing in your podcast where you have this words of wisdom part. and you have quotes in the posts that you do on your website.
Mm.
And one thing that I really appreciated from Cindy's talk is her saying that she became so passionate about what she was doing and learning how to improve what her career was in publishing. And
Yeah.
so she kept training and she kept meeting people and going to conferences and listening to things. And then she said opportunities just started coming.
Yeah.
And she felt like she hasn't worked a day in her life now because she just loves what she does.
Yeah.
This seems to be a common theme from a lot of your interviewees, right?
I think so. I think so. I think there's a bit of words of wisdom right there, for listeners of this program or this show right now is if you can find that, if you can tap into that feeling or that emotion, it's like Cindy said, it's going to open up a whole bunch of new opportunities for you. And then as that starts to occur, I mean, that's where the enjoyment's going to come, and you're going to be sort of treated to new worlds, new chances to build your business or to build your career perhaps that way. And yeah, Cindy in particular, she's probably the most well-connected person that I've ever come across in my days of, especially within Tokyo. I think she knows everybody in town, and and beyond that, yeah, she is a happy person, I would say. And part of that is a lot of the satisfaction that she derives from those personal interactions. And I might add as well, like she's the very first person that would go out of her way to kind of help you out. She'll ask, what do you need? What are you after? And she'll try to serve those needs first and foremost. And guess what? I mean, those things come back around. People don't forget about that, about those acts, and I think they probably come back tenfold for her and for anyone who engages in that type of activity. So yeah, it was really great to speak with her and to hear that. That quote in particular did stick out for me.
Yeah, it's great. The first episode I listened to, you talked with Rosella
Hmm.
Botton, who's a UN vulnerability analysis advisor.
Yeah.
And her job is intense. Like, how does someone do that job and not burn out?
Yeah.
It is just incredible. And that was such a great interview. And her talking about following her passion, not becoming cold
Mm,
to the experiences of engaging with people in such dire need,
yeah.
trying to be human as a
Yeah.
part of the process.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. She had mentioned early on in her career when she was just starting out that it's must be incredibly difficult, right? You're going into sometimes like war ravaged communities or ones that have been affected by natural disasters. And her job is to basically go and meet with these people and find out what their needs are, find out what their challenges or hardships are. So then she can gather all that information, take it back to the office and meet with the other people that are doing similar work to formulate a plan, for the World Food Program, which is where she works. And she said in her early days, one of the things was that she would invest so much of herself into these talks with these people, and of course, she wanted to help them in any way she could, but by doing so, she was investing herself so much, or to the point where it was affecting her ability to do her job well. She was just getting too emotional, is what she had said. And gradually, she was able to kind of find a happy medium somewhere in the middle, maybe not way over here, but somewhere in the middle where she could still do her job very well, but still remain, or still have high levels of empathy. And yeah, it was a journey, a self journey for her, the way she described it. But she was able to eventually reach that point. And yeah, wow, what an interview that was with her. I mean, I think I'd mentioned a couple times when I was speaking with her, like what I just kept getting this vibe or this feeling of this just like big heart, this big heart of what she was doing and what she represented. And truly, I mean, if we had more people like Rosella in the world, we'd be certainly better off for it. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
really, really nice interview.
I loved her idea of how she connects with people because she's a mother.
Yeah.
And she talks about her experiences as a mother and raising four
Mhm.
kids as a way to engage with people who she meets around the world, who
Yeah.
she's trying to help. But as someone coming in from the outside, we know this for a variety of experiences and jobs. coming in from the outside, it's difficult for the local people to trust you and engage with you as a real person, not just a person doing a job, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was her point of entry, was talking about her own kids and being a mother. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. She'd mentioned, I think, some of the, like I don't know, those barriers essentially, coming in as this official United Nations official, like, the outward perceptions, like, what do you know about my life, and what do you know about, what I'm experiencing right now? But you're right, and exactly what she had said was that she would just connect with them on a humanistic level, as a mother, as someone who has children, and it's a common element that we all share, and like you said, that was her way into to kind of break down those barriers and create opportunities for that empathy to start taking place where she could start to serve their needs. So yeah, it was a really nice talk.
And that story where she just joins migrants walking
Yeah,
to understand their experience better.
right, right.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And it's just, yeah, it's talks like that that stick with you. They do, and I'm sure you've had quite a few guests on as well that you've had similar experiences where there's so many things, there's so much information flying around, but afterwards, as you're reflecting, there's certain points or certain tidbits of information that are just you just know are going to stick with you forever. Messages or things like sources of inspiration. And in that talk in particular with Rosella, and there was a ton for me personally. So I'm glad to hear that you also were able to get something from it too.
Yeah. That's one of the things I really like about your format, is that you take a quote from every episode and you have a post describing the episode, describing the person, but also you give the quote. This is from Rosella Botton. I think empathy is at the core of our job. If you don't put yourself in the position of the people you interview, it's very difficult to understand.
Yeah. 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 Just it resonated with me when I heard it. And I'm thrilled to hear that it's reaching somebody else and hitting somebody else in a different way as well, like yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome. As a content creator, as an interviewer, as a podcaster, it really hit with me as well. And
Mm.
I really try to respect the time of the interviewee. I do my research, I read the books, I dive into their videos and
Yeah. Yeah.
podcasts before, right?
Yeah.
And I'm so happy when the guest says, "Thank you for doing that. Thanks for doing all the
Mm.
research." And you listen to sometimes other interviews and you're like, wow, that person did not do any
Yeah.
research on
Yeah.
that person. How did they do that?
Right.
Why? How
Right.
disrespectful, you know?
Exactly. Exactly. It really it's really quite simple to kind of notice that difference, like yourself today. I mean, and bringing up all these different examples on my website, and then some of the interviews, some of the talks. Like I can clearly understand that you've certainly done your research on it, and which is great in the sense that like it allows us to have these kind of more in-depth sort of conversations, which ultimately are going to serve the listeners' needs as well. So yeah, it's a complete disservice when that unfortunately doesn't take place, but at least we're both on the same page when it comes to that. So I know your guests and your listeners have certainly been treated to that along the way, and everything that
Well,
I've seen in your talks. So
it's part of how I want to run my business. It's
yeah,
part of how I want to live my life.
yeah,
I want to show respect for other people, but I
mm,
also want to do things of quality that are
yeah,
gonna last for a long time.
yeah,
So I see this in what you're doing too, Christopher. You are creating high quality content which will last. You're
mm,
not just doing trendy things which are fun to watch and nobody's going to care about in a year's time.
yeah.
I think what you're putting out there is going to serve as content that people want to watch and learn from for many years. So
Well, I
you're
hope
doing a
so.
great job.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Part of it as well, I think for me is that, I've been around youth, in my early days of teaching within Japan. And, I think again, just comes back to personality and wanting to create, like you said, good content that is going to be valuable and useful to people. And one of the early comments that I received about one of the episodes, I can't even remember which episode it was now, to be honest, but um, I think it was a parent who had written a comment in Facebook or elsewhere saying like, oh, I'd wished that I had had something like an access or a resource like this when I was in high school, when I was trying to decide what to study, when I was going to go to university, and rather than just like the standard professions, a police officer, a teacher, this or that, a nurse, a doctor, because there's so much out there, right? There's so many things out there. And that one stuck with me for obvious reasons. Like that's part of the motivation as well. It's another thing within my mind map that I put out there earlier that I think is important. Like I want to create opportunities not only for my daughter to see, but for anyone and everyone. I mean, I remember going through this as well. Like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do when I, finish university? What do I want to do before I go into university? Those are major decisions. Obviously, what you're going to study, the area of focus, all these things. And there's only so much I think you can get from a dry Wikipedia sort of entry, to be honest. So to have an opportunity to not only like listen and even watch, I've got a YouTube channel going now too, watch interviews, and also even contact details for some of these guests. Some of them are willing to share that. I think it's a great resource for people, and especially youth who are trying to navigate this world and find out what is available to them. So I think that's another thing that just, I certainly don't want to be overlooked. I think it serves those needs as well. And yeah, thank you very much for those comments. They mean a lot.
No, absolutely. And you've just started just 3 months ago. So I often get students contacting
Mhm.
me and
Yeah.
saying, I just found all your videos. And today, Christopher, you are number 366
Wow.
since I started
Wow.
2 years ago.
Congratulations.
And so you start doing categories
Yeah.
on your website
Yeah.
or on your YouTube channel or
Yeah.
on your podcast. And then people who are looking for that content in particular
Yeah.
are just gonna binge
Yeah.
watch
Yeah.
all of that or binge listen
Yeah.
all of that, right?
Exactly. That's sort of the plan for me right now. I'm aiming to get through about a year, maybe, well, 8 months maybe worth. And then once I have that, I'm not putting in as many videos out as you are right now, about once a week, but probably by about 8 to 10 month mark, I'll have enough that, once I create these categories on the website that you're right, people will be able to go into, I don't know, you know, environmental sustainability, and like look at all the different listings there, or maybe it was in business or finance or entrepreneurship, and explore all the different possibilities out there. So yeah, it's definitely something in the works, just step by
Well,
step.
you have such a wide variety of categories right now, but I think you'll start to see certain themes
Mm.
that seem to make sense to make a playlist or something, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I think I've got too many categories. But one fun thing is I've had repeat guests. And
Mm.
so if someone is on my show 5 or 6 times, I'll make their own playlist and then keep adding to it. And they seem to think that's really fun. And they'll
Yeah.
share their playlist on their website. And that's kind of a fun thing too.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
So you've interviewed a winemaker. Now, an Australian winemaker. I found this episode really interesting.
Mm.
She is like traveling around the world and she loves to travel to places where she can make wine. This is something I'd never heard of before.
Yeah,
She
me
is
too.
also making vegan wine, and she's not a vegan herself, but she noticed that there is demand there, that people want transparency in how it's made. And I thought that was so interesting. Of course, we're
Mm.
trying to reduce our meat and dairy and fish intake because we know there's high carbon impact from that.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of people searching for vegan wine. And then you start questioning, wait a second, isn't all wine vegan? And it's not,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
there is a huge market for doing vegan wine or something. So that was really interesting as a business, like to stand out in your business to do something like that.
Yeah, most definitely. Part of it as well as, I mean, this it's exploration, for not only the listeners, but for myself as well. When I heard these things, like I had no idea, that there was such a thing as vegan wines. And I think she'd mentioned it. It's milk that goes into it to kind of, I forget the word, bring it together, I suppose, at times. The wine, I don't know. There's a certain in the process of winemaking, there is a step where sometimes you need to add that milk to, yeah, to help complete the process, I suppose. But not
It's
always.
a kind of
Yeah,
filter, which
yeah, maybe.
is it's an issue for beer.
Mm,
It can be an issue for sake, I've heard. There is a kind of fish filter used to clarify it,
yeah,
to take out any impurities or
that's
something.
right. Yeah.
I don't know if it's a fish filter in the wine industry. She talked about it on your show a little bit.
Hmm.
But so there's some beers in Japan that aren't vegan vegetarian because they use this fish filter. So you can search that online, but
Yeah.
it's such a big surprise,
Right.
right? So I
Exactly.
think this kind of labeling transparency is definitely a growing part of business. People want to know
Yeah.
how their product is made and
No
what is
doubt.
the carbon impact of their product. And I think this is definitely something to think about in Japan, but all over the world.
Oh, for sure, for sure, and it's right down your alley, obviously, with the sustainability issues. Um, I know in my program, it's funny. There's certain topics that come up over and over again in various parts of the segments. There's one segment right at the end. It's a crystal ball segment where it's basically like highlighting trends and predictions within the future. And I would say 9 times out of 10, it's always linking back to these 2 topics. One is technology and one is the environment, and sometimes both they're together, right? But, yeah, those 2 are almost, inescapable, in that sense. You know, one from, say, the tech perspective of maybe how this technology might influence our ability to produce this product or service more efficiently, which will in turn hopefully, like, lessen the impact on the environment. So that'd be an example of how something is, brought in together. This tech and environment being brought together, and sometimes it's just straight up, environmental, sustainability issues that yeah are constantly, um, top of mind awareness. And coming back to that Australian winemaker, you know, issues like I guess what you were just speaking about, but then also too just like for her within Australia in the last couple of years, like the amount of wildfires and the dryness, obviously within the climate there is something that is certainly a concern for winemakers. Obviously, with irrigation issues and water related issues, that whole industry has to adapt. They have to. I think what she was saying was look at the different types of fruits that they would put into the wine. Maybe say 10 years ago it might have been this selection, but now based on climate change they're having to look and re-examine sort of that process and what would be best, like what's a different type of crop that would grow well enough that they could actually use to make wine with. So I mean there's one example, but almost like I said every episode it's linking back to these 2 areas, and it's absolutely fascinating because you know part of the again another part of the premise of my program is to start raising awareness and having discussion about these issues. As I'm discovering a lot of this information, I'm hoping that listeners are as well, and that in turn can help somebody make maybe I don't know some decisions in their own life about how they might be able to lessen the impact on the environment and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah. One of the other points that I really admired from her episode was about family and
Mm,
how she's a single mother, but she has such great support networks of her family and friends. And I hear this a lot in my interviews of especially female entrepreneurs who are
mm,
trying to do new things, trying to take risks.
yeah.
We know that our support network is so important.
Mm,
There's no way I would have lasted 2 years and 366 episodes without a great network of people, not only supporting the
yeah,
show, but my family,
of course.
So that is definitely a common theme of your interviews as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I probably couldn't explain it any better than the way that you just did. But yeah, definitely. I mean, it's almost like that circle. It starts here within the family. You have that support there, and then it sort of like goes out, into your network, your friends, your associates. And without that, yeah, it's really tough to get much of anything done. And I could certainly attest to that as well, and what I'm doing also right now. So
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree.
But that goes to what we're doing today, collaborating,
That's
right?
right.
And reaching out to other people with similar goals or interests or businesses and trying to collaborate on projects, I think is also really important. So
Uh,
I'm excited about our collaboration
Yeah,
today.
most definitely. Yeah, a bit of a spoiler alert right now. After this, live talk. Joy and I are going to be sitting down having a recording where she'll be a guest on Life as a. So I'm really excited to have her on, and put it out there to your listeners, and then hopefully a bunch of other people that will be able to explore and get to know you and what you do.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
exciting. And it's a different group, it's a different audience, it's a different field,
Mm,
And this is another thing that I find really interesting from your interviews. So, for example, you interviewed a master cake artisan and illusionist, April Julian,
yeah.
and she's doing it as a side hustle. She is so talented,
Not for
and
long, I don't think.
she's on
Not for
Netflix.
long.
Like, she's hugely popular. People
Well,
really
yeah,
appreciate
she
what
she
she
is
does,
now.
right?
Yeah, yeah. This was a really fun story, and this was again, it's just kind of these funny experiences that in doing something like this that just open your world up in so many ways. And this is like the absolute perfect example, I would say, is I I didn't know her. I didn't have any direct contact with her at all. Somebody had shared. I think like an Instagram reel, short video clips or compilation clips of some of her work. It's these hyper realistic cakes that she makes, like a fish, like or of just about anything she could make. This microphone, for example, and it was just amazing. It blew me away. And to be honest, I was trying to get a guest on the show a few weeks earlier, or maybe a month earlier, and I just couldn't. It just wasn't working out. So I'd almost given up on that idea. And then this Instagram reel came out, and I just like, well, what the heck? I'll just contact her, and so I did. And lucky for me, she agreed to come on the show. And what made this really interesting, though, was that she was also about to go. Well, she'd already recorded all these episodes for this Netflix show. Is It Cake? Is it what it's called? And it's hosted by this famous comedian, Saturday Night Live comedian. North American folks would know it's a very popular show. So a celebrity host is on it, and then it's this girl, April Julian, amongst 7 other contestants, where they have to compete against one another in creating. There you go. That's cake right there. That the whole thing is cake. They have to compete against one another in terms of trying to fool celebrity judges. Basically, it's the premise of the show, and it's 8 episodes. But what made it fun was that our recording date for her involvement on my show was, what was it, March 18th, Friday, Japan time. So it would have been March 17th for her. Now, that show, that Netflix show, was debuting March 18th, North American time. So I literally had her on the show on my program hours before her world was going to completely blow up. Completely blow up. And yeah, we just had this really engaging talk. It was a lot of fun. It is over on YouTube, as you can see it on the screen right now. This is just a slideshow, but it does launch eventually into a discussion. But yeah, again, like look at this stuff here, right? Like that is all cake. Um, but basically, the show has become an overnight sensation. A couple days after it launching, I think it hit #1 on Netflix in the US, and then a couple days later, #1 in Canada as well. And her world has completely just like flipped overnight. And we were talking about this potentially happening, during our episode. And I was just even post interview, I sent her a couple of messages saying like, April, are you ready? It's about to go off. It's about to go off. And she's such a genuine and nice personality that she was just playing it, downplaying it all. But sure enough, yeah, the media requests started coming in hard and heavy. And almost every day I sort of tune in and I see some of her posts on Instagram. And oh, it's Elle, the fashion magazine, that's featuring her today. And tomorrow it's this. And the next day it's this. So like it was just wild. And I felt like I was just kind of like riding in the wake of this major sort of happening. And again, like 3 months earlier, nothing like this would have been happening in my own sort of like little world. And just to have been a part of that and still part of it because it's still ongoing. It's only been out for about a week now. It's just been unreal, absolutely unreal.
So fun. And
Yeah.
I love that she is also has this multidiscipline kind of idea, and creativity is her drive.
Oh yeah.
And she, I don't want to give too much away, but in the interview she's talking about how one of her major assets is knowing how to build things from the hardware store,
Yeah.
which you wouldn't imagine, like someone who's a baker, but what she's doing is so far beyond baking,
Oh, I
right?
know. She dropped that in really early into the talk, and it just floored me. Like, I think I probably showed that as well, not only in the audio version, but the video too. I was like, "What? You're in the hardware store for hours on end?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, it's there's more to hyper realistic cake making than just like the cake itself. There's nuts and bolts and all sorts of stuff
You have
and
to be like an
piping and
engineer or a
yeah,
carpenter as
yeah,
well,
yeah.
right?
So it was just yeah, as I was exploring it all and just having fun with it, I knew. Sometimes you just know when you've got a good talk going on, and I was pretty sure that this one's going to would resonate with a lot of people, and I think the people who are able to find it and tune into it are certainly enjoying it. So yeah.
Now you mentioned that one of the common themes seems to be technology,
Mm.
and you have interviewed IT people. Do you come from that background? Is that where it comes from? No.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I just sort of, yeah, just an everyday guy in terms of that, just trying to, I have a basic understanding of it, but no, I don't have any IT stuff. Yeah, there you go. IT analyst right there. It's another joy of doing this is that coming back around to the research on some of these guests, there's areas that might not necessarily be my forte, and I don't know a lot about those areas, but that's also sort of the fascination with it as well, is I get to learn a little bit more about it. A little bit of pressure at times too, because you have to get up to a certain point where you can actually hold a conversation and be able to ask intelligent questions and have some retorts back on some of the things that the guests would say. But yeah, I didn't, and I didn't have a background in it, but yeah, sort of got through
Yeah.
it.
Isn't that hard when you feel a bit intimidated? Because even when you do the research, you're like, I still don't understand it. Am I going to be able to
Yeah,
do this
there's
interview?
yeah, I've got a couple of guests coming up this spring where I'm not gonna lie, I've got this guy, I won't say his name just yet, but he's a he's a serial entrepreneur. This really like a big shot serial entrepreneur, and one of his companies, I highlight that, is within cryptocurrencies. And I have a basic idea of blockchain and what that's all about, but yeah, in terms of researching that and putting that one together, that's one that yeah, it makes me a little bit nervous going into it. But you just gotta get into it and research and study up on it as much as you can. And then I've got another one within law. This guy who's a general counsel for a major Japanese corporation, and he also was within a U.S. conglomerate as well as the sole general counsel. He was the top guy. So yeah, that's another area that I don't have a ton of background in, but again, I've never been one to shy away from digging into all that stuff and just researching and learning. So, you do the best you can do.
Plus,
And
I think as a talk show host, your job
yeah,
is to simplify it, right?
that's it.
So
That's it.
your goal is to get the underlining key principles out. You
That is
don't
it.
need to do like a master's
No,
class
no.
in what is full stack engineer or
Right.
cryptocurrency or these really difficult topics. You're trying to get the key underlining
Yeah.
principles, right?
You want to make it accessible, right? And to make it accessible, it has to be on a level that somebody who's just tuning in would be able to kind of take in and digest. So that's something I constantly remind myself when I start to get a little bit stressed out here. But definitely that's first and foremost. You're always trying to think of your listenership and again making it accessible for them and what they would expect to hear. So
Yeah. And before we started, you also talked about it's a great networking tool, right? You're
mm,
reaching out to people you're really interested in, and you don't know what opportunities that's going to open up. But like sending your media kit, sending your resume, the
yeah.
more you reach out and interview people, or even reach out and don't get the interview, it's still a positive move forward into the career that you want to develop, right?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Like I'm on LinkedIn as well, and within LinkedIn, I mean, there's the free versions and there's paid versions, and I'm on a free version, but at times you'll see like they'll give you stats and stuff. Who's viewing your profile, how many people are viewing it, and of course, in doing this, just those numbers have just started to go up. significantly. And then at times it'll show you exactly who it was. And other times it'll just say like, well, somebody from this industry, or it'll give like a professional title of somebody who's viewed, what you're doing. So you're starting to get an idea or a feel for who might be interested in your work. And although like I don't have a personal motivation right now in terms of trying to like angle myself into a particular career with this, like say working for another corporation, because I'm quite enamored with what I'm doing right now within this program. Just last week, I think there was somebody like a broadcasting executive or something. Who, again, there's no name attached to it, but the fact that it's still attracting that type of attention just sort of illustrates your point. That if you put yourself out there enough, things will start to kind of come back to you in different ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And yeah, that's not something that I was aiming to do, but it's starting to organically sort of evolve and occur, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you describe yourself? It's always hard, right? Like we started the show with a definition that just does not fit at all for what you're doing. This is your link tree, which we'll share the link below. I think it should already be there.
Mm.
You've got your website. You're very active on different social media. Which do you like? Which platform do you like using the most?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a tough question as well. I mean, yeah, they're so different, and that's also something that I'm learning as well. The types of audience that you engage with, like on LinkedIn, the types of discussions that you can have there are fun because they're like, well, for me at least, they're focused on the professional side of things, which for me is, yeah, I really enjoy that. But then also too, like on something like Twitter, it's quick, it's simple, it's easy, and that's my biggest following at the moment is over there. But then also too for like the creative side, and sort of like the artsy side of it as well. I enjoy Instagram, although it's one of my smallest right now. I just again started that channel, or that feed not too long ago. So I haven't even cracked 100 followers. I don't think on that one yet. But I enjoy that one because it's I enjoy the art to it all as well, and having some of these pictures out there, and even just like when you're creating your own stories and putting those things together, it allows me to exercise a different part of my brain, I suppose, in the creative side of it all. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could really give you a straight up answer. I kind of danced around your question there, but yeah, I like them all for different reasons, I guess. And Facebook too. I mean, Facebook is one that is nice to just connect with, friends and family and share what's going on. And I like the personal sort of nature of Facebook. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You, like me, you are on many different platforms, and you'll start to see the characteristics which are different for each platform and the kind of people that
Yeah.
like using only those platforms. But it's always a difficult question when people say, "How many followers do you have?" And you're like,
Mm,
"On where?" Yeah.
right. Right.
Or
Right.
what's
Right.
your most popular video or popular episode? On which platform? Like they're
Exactly.
all different in which kinds of topics are most popular. Are you finding that as well?
Oh, for sure, for sure. And not only that, I was just having a conversation about this recently, maybe yesterday or so, with somebody, in terms of like how you're contacting people and how you're reaching out and trying to find different types of guests as well. Sometimes like this particular platform that you, I don't know, that you had been using had been quite fruitful and you want to continue that, but then also you found a guest via email, but that person wants to communicate on WhatsApp, like the app that's primarily used within North America. And then you have some guests here within Japan that are online that want to communicate that way. You start a conversation on Facebook Messenger, and then it needs to go over into email because like just the sharing of files and like it's all of this as well that you have to manage. So I've been like having to learn different programs like apps as well, like WhatsApp, like that one in particular, like I'd never used, but there's been a couple of people in the last few days, at least North American guests that want to communicate that way. So you kind of have to dig into it there. But yeah, in terms of all the different platforms and what it entails, that's another sort of like hidden side to all of this. But I guess you could frame it in a positive way. It's a learning experience, and you're constantly growing and evolving in that sense. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're doing one episode a week. What is your long vision goal? Are you thinking at least 1 year or at least 100 episodes, or do you have any kind of target in mind?
Not a number. I kind of want to do this. as long as I can, to be honest. I mean, it represents so many things, as I've spoken about in this chat already, that, like, I don't know, like, stopping it now, what would that be doing? Like, I'm having great conversations with my daughter, for one, and as my younger daughter gets older, hopefully with her too. So then, like, there's years right there, and where they can just be exposed to different worlds. So, like, that unto itself would make it a worthwhile sort of initiative just to continue on for that reason alone. But then outside of that, I think, if I was looking at eventually finding ways of turning this into a business, and, consistency is key, right? You just have to keep putting it out there and keep growing it and going and going and going. And in these short 3 months, the amount of growth that I've had of the show, I'd say itself, and then for me personally and professionally, it's been great. So if I kind of like add that into the equation, if I just keep doing this over and over, say I do this for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, like where could that lead? And that's incredibly exciting for me to think of, or to even entertain those sort of notions. Um, I'm yeah, I'm certainly aware of, and I would like it to grow into something like that where I can, make a living off of it. But there's just so many other reasons, like non-monetary, motivated, that make sense to just keep driving it forward. That I don't know. I'm not going to set a limit on it because I just want to keep doing it until it feels, or as long as it feels right. And at the moment, I don't see why it wouldn't. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Christopher, for joining today and giving us some insights on your wonderful podcast, talk show,
Yeah, thank
and
you.
videos, Life as a. So
Thank
I
you.
encourage everyone to check it out. Thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, thanks so much, JJ. And also, too, really just want to add this again. JJ is going to be on my show. We're going to go right into a recording on Life as a. After this, it will be recorded, but keep an eye out for it because it's going to be coming out in the spring too. So yeah.
Just a final shout out to two more comments from people on social media while we're live. Allison says, your website looks beautiful. So simple and great photos. Can't wait to listen.
Oh,
Awesome,
thanks.
Allison. Matthew says, are either of you using Note? It's a blogging site that he sees for academics, professionals, and students. Good tip. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I'll check that out.
Thanks, everyone, for joining, and have a great weekend. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, JJ.